As the song suggests, it was totally appropriate for Aaron Burr to feel fearful, anxious, and even paranoid that he was getting squeezed out of power and didn't get to participate in the decision-making process. In this election cycle, we too might feel like we don't get to be in the room either, as the presidential election will be decided most likely in just a few swing states by tiny margins. If you are all agitated, anxious about this election, you are far from alone. Whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, your candidate may or may not win by the slightest of margins, and no matter how the votes are counted on Tuesday, likely there will be challenges and recounts that go on for weeks. If there is not a decisive victory, who knows when we get the answer to who will be our next president? Both candidates will be working every angle they can to get elected. This means, I'm sad to say, most likely the stress will not end on Tuesday night. And the stakes are very high. The two candidates for president represent two different approaches to governing this country, and there are significant threats depending on who wins. There are risks, which I think we all know, to free and fair elections based on legitimate votes not getting able to be made because they've been purged from the voter rolls. Any replacement of Supreme Court justices is of great consequence given their enormous power and lifetime tenure. Women may see even more restriction in their ability to control their own bodies and to decide when and if they wish to have a baby. The dreamers, children who were brought here by undocumented immigrant parents, have grown up here. Children who may not speak their native language could be deported. Many refugees who have come here to escape threats of death in their home country may be deported too, endangering their lives. We are at a crucial time, seeing greater and greater impacts of the continuing increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide that will require drastic changes in how we use fossil fuels and generate energy and heat. A major push is needed by governments around the world to meet this moment. I know I don't have much to have to put too much effort into persuading this congregation just how important this election is and the consequences. What is so disturbing to me is the number of our fellow citizens who do not share my concerns and compassion. And some of these folks would be willing to put their attitudes and values ahead of the institution of democracy. Well, this isn't new by any means, I'm afraid. Democracy has been far from perfectly executed here from the very beginning, that labeled a person of African descent as 3/5 of a vote that they didn't get. Women have only had the vote for 100 years. The reproductive rights granted by the Supreme Court are slowly being removed. Emancipation didn't end slavery, it redefined it as a prison labor force. Voting rights, were taken away with Jim Crow laws. to vote. As a black person, I found out this past week or a couple weeks ago, they had a test that they had to take to guess how many jelly beans there were in a big jar as part of the voting test. On my recent trip, where I found this out, to Montgomery, I also learned about the Southern mobs that used lynching to terrorize black folks into submission for 80 years, from the end of Reconstruction to as late as the 1950s. And it's not just here that the threats to freedom are happening. Internationally, women who have suffered so much loss of personal freedom in places like Afghanistan and Iran. Violence in Gaza and the West Bank have stripped Palestinians of most of their basic rights just to survive and eat. In Russia, continues its attempt to dominate and divide Ukraine. Rights and freedoms are extremely precious and cannot be taken for granted ever. So much rides on the beliefs, values, and ideology of the people who hold and use coercive, often violent force against those who do not share their beliefs, values, and ideology. Those categorized as unbelievers are usually not tolerated and appreciated, but rather suppressed and destroyed. This is one of the very disturbing aspects of this campaign for me as a Unitarian Universalist, is the celebration of white Christian nationalism by some folks who would like to make sure the United States of America remains predominantly Christian, preferably evangelical Protestant, Northern European, heterosexual, binary gendered, married, and giving birth to more than 2.5 children, preferably with mothers at home and fathers working outside the home. This desire to roll back civilization to the 1950s has a strong pull among some of the younger generation of folks who have no clue what that was like and the price both men and women paid for their suburban commuter lifestyle. So, are you worried and anxious and afraid yet? I find Unitarian Universalists need to justify their mental distress before listening to ways to address it. Let me say, without a doubt, there is plenty to be distressed about. Sadly, there is almost always a lot to be freaked out about. And if you're having a great day, you can always reflect on the fact that sickness and old age are coming for you. If you're lucky to live long enough, and all of us are going to die. So there is always plenty of distress in this world of constant change. And that doesn't mean that we need to be in a constant state of a foul mood. There are ways to cope. There are ways to live. That list in that reading that I offered you this morning that Tema read, it's a good start. It's a good start on the way to be happy in spite of the world's stresses and strains. And that doesn't necessarily mean living in denial of reality either. The future always has a scary dimension to it. This moment, right now, however, can be calm and peaceful through responding to this moment with compassion and with wisdom. Methods like the one mentioned, mindful meditation, deep breathing, a body scan, exercise, gratitude, especially getting a good night's sleep, are all well and good. Mind you, they can bring temporary relief. What can bring more lasting stress relief to election anxiety is getting involved and striving to make a positive difference. Those of you who were here in September doing the postcards will know, and those who came again and in October and did the telephoning will know the good feeling that they developed from contributing to a solution. No one who sent a postcard felt like the election swung on their effort, although it might. But being part of that effort with those who share your concern goes a long way to give a fairly strong sense of satisfaction that you are doing something that might make a difference. And you very well may have multiplied your vote. That can be true in many different levels. Being involved in regional or national climate change efforts can make a big difference. I'm attracted to working with Third Act, as I know some of you are as well, to leverage my age now and influence for climate justice. I feel uplifted every time I demonstrate my 24 years in Albany. Whenever we would go to the Capitol to demonstrate, to hear speakers at those demonstrations, going to visit with legislators to argue for a bill or against a bill. All those gave me this wonderful feeling of being part of the solution. Over the years, I know Fourth U has been involved in many different campaigns and actions that have made powerful statements of our values. Doing something is one thing, but acting with others is even more satisfying when you're part of a big group of people. That was especially true when I worked in Albany with a congregationally based community organizing project there. At our public meetings, we had hundreds of people representing many different groups speaking to our elected officials. We'd have them stand up in front and make challenges to them, and we would speak with one voice. And the Unitarian Universalist Association is working to organize with our congregations to respond to what happens during and after the election. And I'd like to show, we've got a video set up for you that just came out of the UUA that describes the work to respond to what happens on and after Tuesday.
Beloveds, we know that the time between now and the election, as well as the weeks following November 5th, have significant potential for increased disinformation, chaos, and even violence in our country. While Unitarian Universalist congregations are not likely to be primary targets at this time, we know that many of our communities are in hotspots where both our members and our neighbors are likely to be at increased risk. This is particularly true for migrants, for trans and non-binary people, for queer folks, and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities.
While it sounds simple, the first and most important thing you can do right now is to be in communication with one another. Check in with your people. Make sure they're okay. Keep the lines of communication open. We've learned some hard lessons throughout recent years, so draw on those lessons from the pandemic to make sure you have effective communication structures and a nimble strategy for how to make decisions together. Pay attention to who is coming in and out of the building when your community is gathered, and remember the importance of de-escalation as you take your own measures to support the safety of all of the people in your space in these uncertain times.
Also, make sure you connect with your regional staff, other local congregations, and experienced organizers in your own neighborhood. The people who will be most equipped to lead in the event of post-election chaos and conflict are those who have lived experiences of the state not being the primary source of their community's safety. People used to moving in coalition, responding strategically under pressure, and seriously taking into account the needs and the safety of a wide variety of people. If you haven't already, have conversations now about whose leadership and analysis you're going to look to for guidance.
Side with Love is actively working with our strategic partners, our Unitarian Universalist state, with timely tools, trainings, and resources to protect our elections and to protect our communities. Those tools include ways to assess threats, de-escalate conflict, and leverage our spiritual and physical assets in this critical time. I know many of you are already doing your part to meet this moment and build resilient communities. And we welcome you all to visit the UUA's new Community Resilience Hub at uua.org/community-resilience-hub. Check in often for updates, new resources, and events that will be added on an ongoing basis. Together, we can harness our power to meet this moment, because democracy isn't just what we do, it is who we are and who we want to be together.
In the coming time, we are going to face many decisions about how we show up publicly, how we protect those who are most vulnerable, and what the most faithful and strategic expression of our values will be. We'll be doing all of this in a range of uncertain and rapidly evolving contexts. Sometimes this will mean bold, prophetic public action. Other moments will demand low ego, low visibility commitment. We must lean into the relationships of accountability and trust within our congregations, among our communities, and across our association to meet this moment with the wisdom and courage that will be required of us.
We've got some exciting times coming. But none of the problems that I've discussed this morning are going to be fixed or permanently lost in one election. There will certainly be regrettable losses that will break our hearts. But losses are inevitable in this world that is constantly changing. What we don't know is the future ahead of us. Imagine being an enslaved person in the 1830s, picking cotton in Georgia on a large plantation. That person might never know or even imagine the freedom that their great-great-grandchildren enjoy today. As Atlanta burned during the Civil War, no one was imagining the vibrant city that it is today. Parents 100 years ago worrying over their children's suffering with childhood diseases could only hope for a time when that disease could be treated with one of the many medications and remedies that are available today. Who knows what the future what future ailments might be cured by the AI revolution. My recommendation, above all else, is to deal with election anxiety, is to take the long view. I thought the world would end in nuclear annihilation when saber-rattling Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. He did cause great destruction to the labor unions and participated in the terrible war in Nicaragua, supporting the Contras to overthrow the Sandinista government. And the world is still here. Hope is still here. No matter what, I fully expect there will be an election in 4 years. And we'll do this all again. Between now and then, maybe, we can work on political polarization that we're suffering today, and maybe do some work to heal some of it. And let us hope and pray, along with this video, for peace on Wednesday, November 6th.